Hey, this is Greg Sadler. You're probably used to seeing me with my hair up and a little bit fancier dress, but the video that I'm shooting here kind of calls for this because one of my long-standing side projects that I've been doing with a good friend of mine for a number of years is something called Classic Metal Class, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about it. And if you are a metalhead, to give you an invite about it. So we've been doing this for, quite a few years now. Scott was originally a business client of mine who wanted to study philosophy and rhetoric, and we started working together. And it turned out that we found out that we were both very close in age and had a great love for classic, that's 1970s, 1980s heavy metal, and for a lot of the bands that came later. So, as we were talking about Aristotle's rhetoric, I found myself using examples to illustrate things coming out of talking about metal albums, metal bands, music history, and Scott would, fire back as well. So we decided at a certain point to pool our resources. We thought about doing a podcast first, and then we thought, let's do something more like a class that could be turned into a show. And that is exactly what we've done. We're meeting monthly, although we had a brief hiatus for a while when we both got very busy, to offer a classic metal class. And we've had a lot of people join us for these classes. We record them on Zoom, and they're always some sort of metal-connected topic. So who is Scott Tarulli? He is a gigging musician, teaches at the Berklee School of Music, has played with all sorts of people, not just in metal and rock, but jazz and pop and R&B. He's got quite a resume, and he's given a lot of thought to not just the technical aspects of metal, but we could call it the sociological and cultural and even philosophical aspects. I bring some philosophical chops having to do with metaphysics or ethics or history or things like that to it, and we always have a really great conversation joined by people who show up for the class and who leave comments, questions, make important points that we respond to. So I'll tell you a little bit about what we do. For each of the class sessions, we have a Zoom that we use for that. We record the session. It's just me and Scott on camera, so if you're kind of leery about it, you don't have to worry about that. And then we upload the video to YouTube, where you can find all the sessions from Classic Metal Class. We also have a class site in the Study with Sadler Teachable Academy, and what we do with that is we store all of the resources because we've got discographies and handouts, links to all the recordings, the plan of sessions yet to come. So, there is an actual class, and it's free. If you got an interest in this, you can join up and be part of it. Class sessions typically take place monthly, every third Saturday of the month at noon Central Time, 1 p.m. Eastern. That is, of course, subject to change because we're both busy people, and this is a bit of a side project. But if you're interested, we'd love for you to join us. Let me tell you a little bit more about what we do. So, there's sessions on music history. Our very first session began with the year 1970, where you can say heavy metal began. And we looked at how it's more than just Black Sabbath. It's also all these other bands. And we looked at the early years of metal. The second session, we looked at the Black Sabbath, Deep Purple, Nexus, and all the cool bands and performers that it spun off in the rest of the 70s and into the 80s. And so we've done a lot of stuff on music history, most recently on Japanese metal in 1970s to 1980s. But we cover a lot of other ground as well. We look at a lot of ethical issues. For example, is it really okay to do a farewell tour if you don't intend to say farewell and you're going to tour again? Or is that doing something wrong? Or how should we look at beefs between important musicians where one group is saying this and the other group is saying that? We look at a lot of metaphysical issues like, well, when does a band cease being that band? What if there's two rival versions of a band? How do we figure that sort of thing out? Or classification issues. And this has to do sometimes with like genres, but also important ideas like influence. What is influence, right? So there's a lot of philosophy that gets brought to bear on this. We also look at some of the themes in heavy metal music. We evaluate albums, but also songs. We look at cover songs and say, are these cover songs better in some way? What's the criterion for that? What makes an album great? All of these are things that we have tackled. And we got a lot of other really cool themes coming up in the months and hopefully years ahead, including some interviews with people who have been involved in metal scenes. So if that's the sort of thing that interests you, you might want to check out the class and put it on your calendar. Join us for a session. We draw on a lot of different resources, so it's a well-informed conversation going on, interviews, books that musicians have written, studies by sociologists and other theorists of metal music, even various philosophers get brought in, but it's not an academic sort of class. We speak in a much more down-to-earth and, let's call it, enthusiastic manner as people who are lifelong metalheads since the early 80s, loving this music, celebrating it, and opening up interesting conversations that show you features that you might not have thought about before in the past. So this is, we're calling it a class. It is a different kind of class. It's not an academic class, although we do bring some intellect and rigor to it. It's really about enjoying and understanding the music that we have been involved with for so long. So again, I'm extending an invitation to you. If you want to join the class, you find a link below that will take you right to the class site. You just join up. It's free, and every month before the session begins, we will send you the link to join. You have to have that in order to get in, and you'll find useful resources, discographies, handouts, other sorts of things that can be quite interesting and useful for you. So if you want to, widen your expertise about classic heavy metal, it's not all just the 70s and 80s. We look at those bands as they are in the current day, and sometimes we look at those who are continuing that. Then this might be a fun class for you to join me and Scott Tarulli in. Think it over, and I think you can tell I'm pretty passionate about the subject, and see if this is something that you would like to join.